Okay, I just thought I might share with you a build that I had done. This is Maisto's Ferrari 488 GTB, and it's approximately somewhere around 1/8 to 1/9 scale. It really is more of a true scale RC that they made. It's fully licensed, so I think that's why the body lines are pretty much spot on with it. And when I first saw it, I really wasn't familiar. I think this thing came out prior to even when I got it. I purchased it somewhere around 2018 to 2019. So, and at that point, I don't think there were really very many new in box ones left. I had came across this one, and it was badly scratched, but it wasn't terribly expensive. And it didn't come with the remote, but I knew that I had wanted to put traditional RC hobby grade electronics into it. So we're going to show you that in a minute or two after we go over some of the visual enhancements. Obviously, we have the blue and white stripes. That's more of a, you may find stripes like that on, say, a 488 Pista. So it really doesn't belong on this car, but I have seen the vinyl kit that you can get for the real one on this. So I thought it looked rather nice, and it really livened up the exterior quite a bit. So we went with that. There's just some detail with the panel lines that we did. On the side panels here, what you have is just some paint instead of a sticker. That normally would come with a sticker that was poorly placed, unfortunately. So I just masked that off and painted that after removing it, obviously. Then in the front, we have some mesh that we added in the lower air dam and on the side pieces as well. Just bear in mind, the body is rather thick. So if you do go and use a rotary tool, a Dremel, or some type of tool to remove that plastic, again, always mask up, wear your eye protection, but especially on some of these things too, where it's a thicker plastic, it's going to offer some more challenges. You want it to monitor your speed of your rotary tool, so you're more cutting than you are melting. I have found that a medium speed works the best for that, so that you don't melt the plastic instead of cutting it. That's the only advice I could really give you additionally with that. And in the back, we have some upgrades as well. This is fully functional rear park lights and brake lights, as well as down here. The uppers are the only ones that light up brighter when you put the brake or reverse on. There's probably a way to piggyback it and make them all do that. I'm kind of new to the whole LED thing, even though they've been around for ages. So I really, it's going to be some growing pains with that to get things the way I really want them. As far as when we come to the profile here, this is the turn signals that we added here. Those will come on when you turn the wheels. And we detailed out the calipers and the brake rotors. So it's just, when I had it apart to add the hobby grade electronics, I really wanted to maybe make it look just a little bit better. The lines, like I said before, were just so gorgeous and perfect. I originally had wanted to do a full race scheme as if it was, have the sponsors on it and everything else, but I've really found no easy way to change the wheels out. So that kind of was left as a failed want or desire. But what I'll do now is I'll try to take off the cover. I'll show you some of what we got going on underneath to do the electronics. So I'll let it keep rotating. You just have to be careful. This is how this comes. This just sits in the track there. This is what your factory lights are going to come for the front. So, but I added the side turn signals and the rears. Let me show you now a little bit about what we have going on. As it loops around here, we'll dive right into the back. What you're looking at here is a grasshopper rear axle. It's probably pretty obvious of what that is. The couple of things that you're going to have to note though is your track width. Your track width is not going to be correct if you leave it stock. And on top of that, as far as I saw, there wasn't a super easy way to modify the hubs to fit the those wheels. So if you were, if you were inclined to try to change out the front and rear tires, which you might be able to do. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like it's going to be some impossible thing that you shouldn't try. This is the way I did mine, I guess is what I should point out. As it comes around to the front, you're going to see the servo. Okay, you could fit a standard size servo. This one here is just a little bit smaller. I just had it laying in a parts bin. So that was the one that I went with. We reinforced some of the chassis with some carbon bits, some carbon fiber tubes. And we just basically, in addition to narrowing the rear axle, we added these little brackets here just to give us a mount for the shocks. Underneath here, the pivot point for the stock Grasshopper axle actually works pretty well with what they already had there. But see now what you have here, it's actually pretty good. You have a little bit of flex here, but when the body gets screwed on, this and here are your screw points for the rear of the body. So that shores this up quite a bit. What I had done initially, I could just quickly try to explain why this offset is here. You'll see the shock is, let me actually turn this off. I can explain it instead of it moving all around. Go right about like that. So you'll see that the shock is obviously cut this way a little bit more. This one here is a little bit more that way. You could even see it with the spacer right up here. That's where it'll be most obvious. Now, the reason being, I'll just go over it very quickly if you should decide to try to do this. When I narrowed this is where, measuring, I don't know if you've heard of the adage, measure twice and cut once. This is probably more of a case of you should measure maybe 4 or 5 times and then keep going back to the body to make sure. In my case, this rear axle was not perfectly centered within the body. So what we had was an axle that was shifted to the left. I believe it was originally shifted to the left or the right, but it's really no difference. But when these modifications happened, they weren't exactly done to the fender measurements. So that's one thing you're just going to have to be careful of when you go to do it. Mine was correctable where the pivot point underneath is. I'll flip it over in a minute and I'll show you that. Matter of fact, actually, since we're talking about it, I'll just show you right now. See if I can kind of monitor the camera and show you. So underneath these 2 screws, I'm not going to take it apart right now, but there'll be a pivot point, a place for the natural pivot point of the Grasshopper axle to fit, and it fits in there pretty well. All I did was just make the diameter a little bit bigger with some thick heat shrink tubing, and it worked very, very well. So when I went to go recenter this, I just added a little bit on one side, took away a little more on the other, and was able to shift it till we landed the axle in exactly the right spot. I mean, that's kind of one of the important things, in car design. I think it's often overlooked, or sometimes overlooked, and we wonder why one car looks so much better than another. And part of that is where your tires sit in the wheel wells. Today, I think there's more awareness of it. There's a lot more people experimenting with wheel and tire combinations, getting very aggressive, maybe getting to the point where it looks somewhat cartoon-like. So that may not be for everybody. But I try to stay away from personal preference issues and debating that type of thing. But in the case of Ferraris, sports cars, any car that has seems to have a good curb appeal, there's almost always some care taken to the arches of where the wheels are. The clearances, when they turn the wheels, how much air is around the fender and the tire. So minimizing that space always makes the car look a little more aggressive. Get it wrong and it can look really a bit odd, I think, sometimes. In the case of this car, the other thing that I should really point out that was probably obvious, but I didn't really talk about, was back here. What we have is the rim is obviously too wide for the wheel is too wide for the tire. But these tires, really there was no other thing that I could think of that I had available in my parts bin. These are Lego Technic Street Sensation tires, kit number 8448. I was into Legos for quite some time, since I'm a child as well. So, I had these kind of things around. To source those tires independently through the internet is not going to be cheap, and it might not be too easy. I in fact did wanted to look for an original set to have as backups for this in case I wanted to run it more than a couple of times. I did experiment with some black rubber bands on the factory tires, but they almost always pop off. It's good for maybe doing some shakedown runs just for seeing operational ability, but in all honesty, by the time you're about a quarter of a halfway through the pack, those rubber bands are going to pop off or slide off or snap even. So you could try gluing them. In my case, I found that they came off more than they snapped, but I wasn't interested in gluing them because I didn't want to sacrifice the factory tires, which in fact offered very little grip. If you wanted to turn this into a drifting Ferrari, which I think would be maybe a little odd, you might want to leave the factory tires on there. But they offered little to no grip, and these were much better. So these just have some foam in them, and they're glued up, obviously. And that's about it. I'll try to give you some close-ups of it with the body off, and then we'll maybe put the body back on. Now let me try to see if I can get you off here without shaking you to bits. Here we go. Okay. So I guess we'll come down in here. I'll just show you the close-up of the steering setup. This way you'll get an idea if you want to try this. Okay. And with just my case here, I just have a little bit of sleeve, a tube, and then another sleeve that fits. That way you get it. What happened with the factory seems as if the camber was being affected by the slop that was at this point right here. So that's why I ended up doing that. That was a bit of a pain, but you could see now it has a better motion with the suspension in the front, and there's not nearly as much slop. So it actually steers pretty well for what is essentially upgraded toy grade, I guess. And that would kind of be the whole purpose of doing this. Some of the places that we added, you can see the carbon fiber rod, just to stiffen it up a little bit. Carbon plate to give us a sturdier mount for the servo. I probably could have done a better job squaring that up. So keep in mind that kind of stuff. I think this is a case of, I was very excited about the ability to get the hobby grade stuff in there. Sometimes the stuff gets a little rushed if you don't see it, and it's not going to be visible anyway. But I guess perfectionists, we know it's there. So, you know, neatness counts. I would like to stress that as well. It really wasn't supposed to go down like this over here, but I needed the room when I came over and realized that I had done what we had spoke about earlier when this measurement was off, when I shortened the axle. So that's just something to keep in mind. I guess back to the measure 4 or 5 times and then make a drawing and then remeasure and then start cutting. That's the best advice I could give you about that. And again, you can see there's a nice movement to those shocks now. I don't know exactly where these shocks came from. Again, I went to my parts bin. They're not a great quality, but I did use a heavyweight oil since I knew this was for on-road. And I did shorten them as well with some spacers inside there to get the ride height right. So I'll put the body back on and we'll show you that. And then basically they just boxed this out with some ABS plastic to fit a larger battery in there than what would fit. Originally, I think that's what the Velcro here was for. I think during some test runs, I just put the Velcro and put the battery there. And that's about it. I think that wraps this up. I'll try to get the body back on it again, and then we'll maybe take you and show you the mesh that I was talking about. See if this won't turn off on me when I put this back in here. Sometimes it does. Maybe try to get this tight a little bit. Oh, and right about there. Okay, so let me get this body back on and we'll just go over a couple of last few little things. You'll see this has to go in something like this. So that drops in there. There's nothing that actually holds these lights in other than they rest right there. And then we lay this over. And you can see it just pretty much drops right on there. Okay, so Let's see where we have it centered back up. Yep, we got it centered back up. So let me just zoom in a little bit on the body now. I'll show you a few little things that we did. So here's some of the detail of the calipers. Okay. Just painted the calipers, detailed out the rotor a little bit. And then we have the mesh in the side intakes in the rear. And then I'll show you the lower air dam over here. And there's one quick word of advice about that as well. You just want to orient your left and right so that they're mirror images of each other. Sometimes the mesh has a noticeable pattern to it. So you want to always observe that pattern and make sure, because actually an unexpected thing in this car was when the lights are on, we get a lace pattern in the front, which I actually found somewhat pleasing. So I didn't fully try to block the light that was scattering from behind the headlights. And I want to say that's about it. I wanted to go over the importance of the tire to fender. So you can see, and it's not going to be easy to make sure that you get this right. So there's a bit of fussing that goes on, but you can see I'm only going through this trouble because I probably spent about 2 hours just on making sure that that was centered in the body. So, and you can see there's still quite a few scratches in there, but it's maddening to try to just get rid of these scratches that are in there sometimes. And like I said, mine came pretty well scratched, so I was happy to get it where it was. That's about it, really. I guess this one wraps up in 17 minutes. I apologize, it was a bit to go over. I might have even left some stuff out. If you have any questions, really feel free to ask me. I do like the social aspect, and thanks for watching.